Welcome to a conversation with Sean Spicer. Please welcome our host, Jessica Anderson, Executive Director of Heritage Action for America.
Good morning. It's nice to see everybody today. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for joining us at the Heritage Foundation. My name is Jessica Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Heritage Action, which is the nation's most effective and largest grassroots organization in the country. We represent over 2 million activists and 20,000 sentinels who are fighting every single day for our freedoms at the local, state, and national level. This is really why we were so interested in our guest's new book, which outlines the fight that all Americans currently face in opposing the Biden regime. The book highlights a bold grassroots agenda for defending America, securing our freedoms, and ensuring policy leaders put America first. Sean Spicer is a man you all probably don't need an introduction to. You're here, you know him, but we really got to know Sean, I think, for really the first time as the first press secretary to President Trump. But as you all, I'm sure, can attest, you fell in love with him on his escapades at Dancing with the Stars. Today, Sean is very busy hosting a new show on Newsmax TV called Spicer & Co. And somehow in between his daily press advising, talking with the president, and working with activists across the country, he's found time to pen this new fantastic book, which we're going to discuss today. The book is called Radical Nation, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's Dangerous Plan for America. Please join me in welcoming Sean Spicer.
Very much. Appreciate it. Of course.
Take a seat.
So this is Heritage.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
It's a gorgeous day. It's a beautiful day in Washington, and we're really glad to have this conversation with you. This is an absolutely fantastic and very timely book. I had the pleasure of being able to read it, and I have a sneak copy before we were here today, and all of our guests will get to take home a copy as well. So I want to start there with your thinking going into the book.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've written a few books before. This is your third, and this is well-timed with everything that we're seeing in Washington, the Biden regime, their very, very dangerous legislative agenda. So what led you to write this book? What was your thinking behind it that made you take pen to paper?
So right after it was clear that Joe Biden was going to become president in January, Humanix, which is the publishing division of Newsmax, said we need to get a book out right away. And you're in a unique position because of your past experience at the White House and the campaign, et cetera, to do this. And so we said, if we can do it real quick, meaning really take a look at these people and what do you think is important that people need to know? And at the time, I was like, okay, well, look at the people that are filling these key positions. Look at the policies that they're talking about pursuing. And the idea was to, frankly, be a warning.
Yeah.
And when you write a book, you sometimes don't know the environment that's going to take place when it publishes. I mean, I think God was like, here you go. This is a clear landing strip for this. Because so much of what I write about is literally happening right now. Whether it's voting rights, the economy, foreign policy, so many of the things that we were looking at in terms of the people that were going to be managing this administration's policies in those areas or the actual policies themselves needed to get written about because, frankly, I don't think, and this is not an insult on the American people, but I think that there's 2 chapters on there about the media. And what is happening right now, Jessica, is that if you wake up any morning and watch the Today Show and read the Washington Post, it's like if you ever saw the Lego movie, it's like everything is great. There's nothing wrong.
Everything's fine.
Everything's fine. Like
everything's
fine. And they call Afghanistan a success. And then Pete Buttigieg said the other day that the economy is a huge success. And you're like, now, if you don't know any different, if that's where you're getting your news from, and you're waking up, you're going to work, you're dropping the kids off, whatever it is, you're living your life. You're like, okay. And you don't realize that there is actually this entire plan taking place in front of our eyes that is frankly changing the fabric and structure of our country. And the best part about this is that you can go, okay, well, Sean, you're a partisan. That's what you think. No. One, Joe Biden told us he was going to be the most progressive president ever. Those are his words, not mine. 3 Fridays ago today, he said, if we pass my 1.2 and 3.5 pieces of legislation, we will transform the structure and nature of the economy. his words. Who asked for that?
Right.
I don't remember that coming out during the campaign. The structure and nature of our economy. What's wrong with it? I didn't realize we had a huge problem need fixing. But we need to understand that that's what's going on in front of our eyes. And if we don't wake up, and I hate to say this because I think a lot of folks on the right talk about the fact that, oh, Biden's not in charge and he's not doing this. Like, we're minimizing the problem. The problem is whoever's in charge, I don't really care. But they're going in a direction that I don't want to go. And I don't think most people realize once we head there, that once government has its tentacles and things, it never lets go.
So you talk about this a lot in the book, and you dig deep into how Biden basically became who he is, and a lot of the advice that he's taking. And I want to read a part of this. It's towards the end of the book, but you're referencing, I think, an incredibly pivotal moment in the Biden administration right at the beginning when he got together with all these liberal historians, and he put everybody in a room. There was no conservatives there. Not that we aren't available. Right. Not that there aren't historians available to go visit with him. He didn't invite them. And so you write, and I'm going to read this for everybody. According to these reports of this meeting, Joe Biden appears to be thinking of his place in history. And that's why he seems hell-bent on accomplishing big things in a big hurry. Mike Allen of Axios, who broke the story about the meeting, about a secret meeting, called it a discussion of how big is too big and how fast is too fast to jam through a once-in-a-lifetime historic change to America. This secret meeting outlined for the history books marker of the think big, go big mentality that pervades the West Wing today. The historians that were there reportedly told Biden exactly what he wanted to hear. Forget bipartisanship and forget playing by the rules. Now is the time to bulldoze anything that stands in your way, including such bipartisan niceties as the filibuster. You go on to say the historians leaned in, they say go big, do it now. And I love this part, because no one's really tying this together. They confirmed Joe Biden's worst instincts, urging him to spend big, grow the size of government, and expand the power of government beyond what we saw with FDR. And Joe Biden loves the growing narrative that he's bolder, has bigger thinking than FDR, and then President Obama.
Exactly.
That's
but think about it. Everything that he said is he gets it. Time is limited. And I think that they get this, unlike a lot of previous administrations from both parties. They have a window, and they know that you have to get as much done as quick as possible. Last night, he was asked, will you consider removing the filibuster for certain things? He said yes for voting rights, potentially for this other thing, and for other things. He gets it. At some point, they're just going to do it, especially if they realize that they're going to lose the House, which they will. Mark my words, the few weeks leading up to it, it's just going to be a flurry. They are going to get as much done as possible. He understands this. I will give him credit as a politician for that. He understands that he has to cement his legacy. Right. FDR is still FDR. We talk about him because he went big and bold, and we have all of these government programs because of that, right? So if you're going to, the only way you become, the talking point in the future is if people start going, oh, you know what Biden did? So he's got to get all this stuff done. 1.2 trillion, 3.5 trillion. I mean, those are numbers that we've never heard of. He gets it. And he wants people to be talking about him infinitum as, remember what Biden did, and kind of replace the talk of the New Deal with, remember when Biden passed Build Back Better? That's going to be the new talking point for politicians in the future on the left. And he gets the fact that Barack Obama may have been the first black president, but he will be the most progressive president. Right. And he wants to cement that. I mean, I don't think it's alarmist to suggest that at his age that he is probably a one-term president. And I think he recognizes that, and I think anybody with eyes and ears and a pulse gets that. And so he's going to do as much as he can, as quick as he can.
So the impact of this will be profound.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I like to say is you have to understand what I call the big why. Why are they doing all of this? Okay? And the thing is that in isolation, you can explain one or two things and say, oh, it's because of this or that. And it's not. They all tie together. Everything is about maintaining permanent political power, right? So think about this, because if you have power and it's permanent, then you can continue to pass your policies infinitum. So what do you need to do? Well, two things. One is you need to maintain power in those key areas, right? So one, you pack the court. Two, you make D.C. a state, you make Puerto Rico a state, and what happens? You get potentially 4 permanent Democratic senators. The District of Columbia votes 95-5 on a good day for Democrats. They will. It's like a given. You will have 2 Democrats, and considering the history of the Senate, I mean, it would be pretty hard to start overcoming not just 2 but 4 definitely. So that gives you that. It guarantees you'd never lose a supermajority, pretty much. And then what do you also do? You need new voters. So you let people come in through the southern border. You immediately make them eligible for citizenship and to vote. You do things like they're doing in Vermont in 2 cities, Montpelier and one other one, where you now allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. You give them driver's licenses. So if you have a driver's license and you can vote, well, who's really going to check to make sure that you can't vote in a federal election? No one. So you start to do that, and what do? You ensure that you're going to always have the votes, and you've always got the institutions in control. Boom.
So there's a policy agenda. We're seeing that with the $5.5 trillion reconciliation plus infrastructure package that would affect all of the policies that you warn about in this book from cradle to grave. There's the process agenda with the filibuster, with the additional states. There's the political agenda, of course, because they want to continue to win elections and cement their power. But there's also the cancel agenda. And you talk about this in your book. The agenda to cancel conservatives in every aspect of life, in the media. They're going after Newsmax. In the mainstream press, they're going after families. They're going after parents now because of standing up against CRT, critical race theory. What's the deal with cancel culture and this cancel agenda?
I'm glad you brought it up because it ties into the first 2 things. Liberals are afraid of conservatives because our agenda and our policies make sense. And the second that you expose that, they win. I mean, they win and we lose. So what do? They have to cancel us. They don't want your voices heard. So they call you a racist, a bigot, a misogynist. Anytime that you challenge anything, you're a bad person. And I got to be honest, as someone who's dealt with my fair share of that, it doesn't feel great. And it takes a pretty thick skin. I'll give you a silly example. I was out with a bunch of guys a couple weeks ago, and they were telling me this story out in Loudoun County, Virginia, where a bunch of parents were getting involved in their school. And one of the women works at Verizon. So she was arguing against a lot of the changes that they were making, saying that she didn't think that they made sense and whatever. So what did they do? They called Verizon. They called HR and said, "You're a publicly traded company. We wanted to let you know that this woman has been engaged in racist behavior. And, should that come up in the workforce, we just wanted to make sure that you documented it, that she's been doing this in her private life." I mean, her racist actions were speaking out about changes that the school board wanted to make. But they wanted to make sure it was documented in HR because, and so what do you think the HR person does? Gosh, I never, maybe I should call her boss and see what's going on. And so immediately, what's the reaction? Okay, I'm going to stop talking about school. I'm not going to back down. Who wants to put up with that? Who wants people in front of their house? Who wants their number listed online? They cancel you. They shame you if you speak out against it. And it takes a lot. I get it. I mean, I wouldn't want that for my family, my friends. I know my family has had to endure stuff, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But they get the game, which is I'm going to silence you. I'm going to shut you up. And then, again, you can't get the facts out. You can't present an alternative. I mean, think about this. You brought it up. They're trying to get Congress has sent a letter to AT&T, Verizon, all of these cable carriers and saying, explain why you're carrying Newsmax, Fox, and OAN. What? What do you mean explain what? First of all, because we have a ton of viewers, thank you. Secondly, what's going on in America where if you offer an alternative view, I mean, you can have MSNBC on, but no one cares. I mean, it's amazing to me, but that's the idea, is to get rid of any dissenting voices. And I say, in an audience that's particularly young today, It's not easy, guys, but you got to do it, because if you don't fight back and get your voice out there, they win. And I don't want to jump ahead, but there's a chapter in the book that deals with this, about how to get involved, how to understand and fight back. And they make it very difficult for folks to do it. But I believe, and if I might digress, but in every argument, if you dissect it, we win, they lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're afraid of the facts and the logic that is behind conservative principles and ideas.
They refuse to debate us
Right.
on the facts. They
Sure.
refuse to have an actual...
So what they say is, oh, you support Trump, he's horrible. It's all about style. How can you support him? How can you support oh, what about the fact? What about the policy? Do you mind if I digress? I want to give you my favorite example in the book. And I don't know, I'm just obsessed with this because it's easy. The framers decided that the District of Columbia, where we are now, should be separate than a state. They didn't want the seat of government in any state, right? So in 1790, they took a part from Virginia and a part from Maryland and created a 10-square-mile district, which we're in right now. In 1835, they gave back the part of Virginia to Virginia because it wasn't being used. I happen to live there now. So the Democrats come along and they say, well, the District of Columbia should be a state. We should allow people to vote. I'm for people voting. I'm for voting rights. So that sounds great. But wait, let me think of a different solution. Why don't we give back the part of Maryland to Maryland if it's not being used? Because it's already a state and it would make sense. Well, they're against that. Why? Why wouldn't you just give back to Maryland, which is Maryland, which, by the way, is the exact same thing that we did to Virginia, and then you keep this little enclave from about here to the White House, carve that out for the federal district? That seems to make the most sense, but again, what's the real motive?
Yeah.
It's not about letting them vote, it's about getting 2 senators. And if we don't scratch the surface of these arguments, we miss the real motive at hand.
It's amazing the way the left works, because they almost convince you, we've been talking a lot about this at Heritage Action, they almost convince you to drink sand, telling you it's water.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a huge problem for generation younger than me that really doesn't even know what freedom is. So we're out here as conservatives talking about preserving freedom and protecting your freedoms. Well, the people that are in their 20s, those that are just getting their first job, just graduating college, coming out of the COVID pandemic, my 8-year-old son being forced to wear a mask in school, this is the world he knows. This is what he knows. So what advice do you have for us to think through? How do we first define freedom to the next generation in an effort to protect it, to even get to the goal of preserving it and handing it down from generation to generation?
I think the first thing is to kind of talk about what you're delving into, which is to explain that having a free exchange of ideas is what the country's all about. I mean, it's ironic that the left, the group that talks about themselves being the tolerant, inclusive group, is the least tolerant. I don't have a problem with MSNBC. I don't have a problem with Rachel Maddow. I think that's awesome. I love the idea that there's dissenting voices. I love to actually flip the channel here and there, much to the dismay of my family. When they're watching something, I flick around. But I think that that's healthy. I actually think it makes me a stronger conservative when I can listen to what they say. And so I think the easiest thing, again, is go back to logic and facts and say, why shouldn't we hear both sides? I think that you should hear crazy people. Because you go, okay, wait, that is crazy. Now I know why we're doing what we're doing. But you should realize that there's dissenting opinion, that there are a spectrum of opinions. That's what makes debate healthy. We should encourage it, especially at college campuses. I mean, the funny part about college, that's supposedly one of the reasons you're there, is to get exposed to ideas and different views, and yet it's like, no. Here is what we will listen to, comrades. And I think that what I would say is that push people to say, no, let that voice in. Let's have a debate. Let's talk about it. And then secondly, I think is to get involved and understand that the tools are there, whether it's Heritage Action. You and I had this discussion like a week ago. I grew up early in the 90s doing campaigns where like the Heritage Issue book, and I know has been renamed, but was my Bible because it had facts and figures in it. And it's all available online now that Heritage just puts out there. So when you want to talk about healthcare or tax policy, you can literally debate with facts. Because the left wants to talk about theories and, feelings. I want to talk about facts. What's going to make your life better? what's going to make your community stronger, your business grow, all that kind of stuff. And I think that if we make it fact-based, we win more.
So the book spends a lot of time, I think, providentially warning about what is to come. And one of the things it warns about is our American institutions being weaponized against us, and in particular the Department of Justice, that has basically launched an all-out assault on all of us, everyday average Americans, and particularly parents. And so one of the really unique phenomenons that have happened around the country that as a grassroots organization we've been able to be on the front row to watch is all of these parents coming out of the woodworks, getting involved, having the facts, going to the microphone, being brave enough to stand up. Now, all of these parents may not have been conservative voters before.
Probably not.
Probably not. They may be actually new to the fold. So what can we do to kind of bridge the gap right now between where we want to go with a conservative, America First public policy agenda and channeling that energy that is so palpable from parents right now?
Well, I think one of the beauties is that we have more tools than ever before, right? When I was growing up, we had newspapers, and that was, I mean, you could write letters to the editor, and like in 8 days, maybe one would sneak through, but that was it. And I know...
Do you even know what newspapers are anymore? I mean, honestly.
Funny, I have a bunch of like framed newspapers, and my kids are like, where did those things come from? And they're 10.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that you have is the ability, like I love just tweeting out like literally, fun facts of the day or something, right? And I think that there are tools, there are videos, and whether it's TikTok or Snapchat or YouTube, I mean, there are so many tools at your disposal now to get involved and just lay facts out and issues in a way that's not necessarily confrontational. But I mean, like I was walking down Pennsylvania Avenue this morning, on the House side. And there's a big thing from the Peterson Institute about the national debt. And I'm just going to tweet it out the national debt now is $28 trillion. Every single American owns $89,000 in debt, every single one, man, woman, child. And so I was like, oh, that would be just a fact. I mean, it's like, again, once you realize that when you talk about this spending, I mean, this is before we spend another $5 trillion, you all owe 90 grand, every person. And when interest rates go back up, which they will at some point, it's just a fact, we're going to be really screwed. Yeah. But I think explaining to people what is going on, and just, again, we don't have to persuade in the same way that they do, because we actually can just say, do you realize you owe this much money? And you're going to owe another $5 trillion. What are you getting for it? When you walk, I mean, the other day, I'm literally watching this town hall like with Biden last night. No joke, folks. That was my favorite. How many times did he say that? I was like, stop it with the no joke. My daddy used to say, Joey, no joke. I'm like, but he's sitting there going, so I gathered all of the big companies and I said, we've got to start operating 24/7. I'm like, dude, they won't come to work right now for 8 hours and you want them to work 24/7? Like, first get the first 8 hours under control, then worry about the other 16. But the problem is that everyone's like, oh, that's a great idea. They can't get people to work for 8 hours a day, and their answer is, let's make them work 24. 2 additional shifts. Hello? We don't have truck drivers because they're getting paid to stay at home. We're not getting people to make goods, to ship them, to stock it. Go to a restaurant now. Go anywhere. They've got signs, please bear with us. We're short on help. And their answer is, let's make people work more? Are you kidding? This is but it defies common sense. And I think that's the beauty of what we have going right now, is if we can walk up to somebody and say, so let me get this straight. The administration's solution is to tell people who aren't working to work more. Oh, I mean, I got a D in economics and I get this.
You should have led with that story. Sean, what does President Trump think of the book?
Well, if you flip it, he endorsed it right on the back. He was very kind. He said it's MAGA all the way.
MAGA all the way.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I would actually say, and it's funny, this is meant as a compliment in case the president's listening. People always give the president a lot of credit for what he did when he was in office. He had this business background and all this. I got to be honest, the one thing that Donald Trump did more than anything else was bring common sense. Just the idea, like I told a bunch of stories when I first left the White House. I remember one day we're sitting in the Roosevelt room. It was right after he was signing this executive order on Keystone XL pipeline to get it back going. And he stops in the middle of this thing and he says, it's like he goes, hey, Jessica, we're going to use U.S. steel for this, right? And they were like, well, sir, da, da, da. He goes, whoa, 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 and just stops. What do you mean? We're doing all this, and we're not using U.S. steel? And they start telling, he goes, no, no, stop. We're not doing this until you guys redo this thing, because we're going to make sure we're U.S. steel. It was common sense. Like, why are we doing all of this stuff and not making sure that we use a U.S. product in doing it? Now, there are some challenges in doing that, and he understood, like, we worked through, how much source material we had, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that it took common sense to say, why aren't we making America? I was the U.S. trade rep under Bush for 3 years, last 3 years of his administration. We were told over and over again, well, unfortunately, NAFTA is a signed trade agreement. It's in force, as they say, and so there's nothing we can do about it. Okay. Trump came in and said, I don't really care. It's a bad deal for our workers. Why are auto workers getting screwed? Why are Wisconsin dairy farmers getting screwed? Why is our technological developers getting screwed on intellectual property? So we're just going to tear it up and redo it. And everyone went, you just can't do that. That's not how it's supposed to work. And he goes, I don't care. Well, you think about it, why wouldn't we have done that? Why were we in a deal with our two closest trading partners to the north and south on a deal that screwed our own workers? I mean, granted, in the 1990s, it was a different world. I get it. But why not modernize it? And yet the mentality in Washington is, well, unfortunately, it's signed. It's in a cupboard over there. You can't touch it. No one can take it out. You can look. Trump brought common sense to so many issues. Why are we letting China walk all over us? Why don't we stand up to them? All of these things, and I think part of this is we need more common sense brought to the debate, and that's what I think more than anything. When I talked to him about it, he recognized, he appreciated, is that we need to get back to understanding what worked and what didn't. And the problem, frankly, with the last election, beyond everything, all the irregularities, was it was a style versus substance. Every time I talked to a person that was either a Democrat voting for Biden or a disaffected Republican, it was like, oh, I just don't like the tweets. I'm like, okay. I mean, tweets don't hurt you. I'm sorry, snowflake. It's not how it works. Tweets don't hurt you. They don't make you better. Policies do. And I think we are seeing the consequences of that now.
I love that. I also think Trump taught us how to fight.
Yes.
Right?
And that's the thing, Jessica. You brought this up a minute ago. You have to understand the country's worth saving.
That's right.
And if you don't fight, they win. Mm-hmm. So, it's worth it on so many levels. And if I can, it was funny. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was 2 or 3 maybe now, I got an email on a Wednesday morning, and it said President Trump in 2019 had appointed me to a 3-year term on the U.S. Board of Visitors for the Naval Academy. And I got an email from the White House Presidential Personnel Office, and it said, thank you for your service. President Biden would like your resignation by 6 p.m. today, or you'll be terminated. So I wrote back, no, period. And then we sued him.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but there's 11 people that were on the board of West Point, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, and 2 of us, Russ Vought, myself, who's the Director of Office Management and Budget for President Trump, put our name on a lawsuit. It's not great going up against, but it's the right thing to do. My term ends in a month. I might have been to one more meeting. But it's important to set the precedent. And again, the easy thing is to say, that's a bummer. The hard thing is to say, I'm willing to put my name on a lawsuit and sue the President of the United States. But it's not about me. It's about whether or not a future president can do this. And I think if we're willing to go out there and say that we believe that what makes this country great is worth fighting for, then in each little way, go for it. Do it. Be a parent. Show up at a school board meeting. Run for office. Engage online with people. Put facts out there. But it's our country to save and to fight for.
There's a lot we can fight on right now. The fight.
Not us.
We will be fighting. The fight to make it easier to vote, harder to cheat.
Right.
The election integrity issue is obviously front of center all across the country. The left has used it to smear every single one of us that wants a safe and secure election. We talked about critical race theory and the role of school boards and parents and actually demanding civility in our schools and not allow them to be indoctrinated. We've obviously got this $1 trillion spending behemoth that's coming towards us. Where do you see kind of the next fight, the next cliff? What's next for conservatives?
It's an interesting question because here's how I would answer this. I believe that if Republicans get out of their own way, they'll win back the House of Representatives. The question is, will they lead? What will they fight for? Being in power for the sake of being power is not worth fighting for. I mean, that's great. I'm sure you get a better driver and more stationary and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot worth fighting for that you just mentioned. And I think that the Republican leaders need to say, if you give us the honor and opportunity to lead again, we will fight for you, we will fight for this country, we will fight for the values. It's not easy. But I'll tell you, there's so much going on in government. Why are we not looking and finding, there should be more of a value of our tax dollar? How much money is being wasted? Why are we just allowing it to happen? If you stop and say, has any senator read what's in the $3.5 trillion bill? That should be the first question. We're spending all this money. Do you even know what's in it?
First off, they haven't.
Right, that they don't even, and think about this, they just started to negotiate the price tag. They said, okay, tell us what number you can live in it. No, what do you want first, and then tell me how much it costs, not how much are you willing to blow of our future generations' money. And oh, by the way, what's getting lost in all of this is, you know who's financing it? China. I mean, think about this. We just went through a pandemic that they sent us, and then we turned around and said, can we buy our PPE and our drugs from you? I mean, that's literally like going to the guy who robbed your house and saying, can you give me a loan with my money? I mean, it's crazy, and yet there's nothing being done about it. We should have used this opportunity to look in and say, what can we do? Pete Buttigieg the other day, when he called this economy a success, said maybe it's an opportunity for a lot of U.S. companies to think about coming back. At the same time that they're raising the corporate tax, really? You think that that's what they're going to do? I'm getting screwed. You're costing me more money. I should come home. Again, it defies logic.
So you spend a lot of time in here outlining everything that we have to fight on. We've talked about it here today. You've danced around the things that we need to do. I mean, it's very clear you're incredibly passionate about this. We first have to show up.
Right.
We have to be there. We have to be the man in the arena. We have to show up. We have to have the facts on our side. Take us from there. What if we get canceled? What about, Senator Albers in Georgia that lost his job because of carrying the state election integrity bill in Georgia? What do you do then? What's next?
Well, again, I think the easy thing is to give up. The hard thing is to stay in the arena that you just mentioned. But if you look, generally speaking, I think the people who stay in the arena and fight eventually win. Yeah. It may not be easy. It may not be quick. I think we live in a society that wants instant gratification and wants to look at your tweets and say, okay, how many retweets and how many likes did I get on Instagram? Sometimes it takes a while. It's like a video that sometimes you put up and you go, wow, it got 15 views, and then 3 days later it's 100. But some things take a while to percolate. But be willing to stay in the arena, to engage. When they cancel you, as I said over and over again, they win when you give up.
Right.
So stay in. I mean, go to a different platform. There's a million out there. Trump just announced, his own platform. There's Getter. There's Parler. I mean, they're losing the ability to do that. They controlled the ecosystem for so long. Big tech, Hollywood, late night shows, academia, government, big tech, all big corporate America. They've controlled those. But what happens is, in the 90s, it was the advent of talk radio, and they started to go, oh gosh, how do we come around that? And then they took over big tech, and suddenly Republicans and conservatives started saying, well, we can actually use Twitter, and so what do? We started canceling. So now our team has gone out and started to build new platforms. But we need to be willing to go and migrate. Look, it's amazing. We launched Newsmax, my show, a year and a half ago. There were probably more people in this room than watched the first episode. And now we're averaging hundreds of thousands of people a night, nipping at CNN's heels. We beat a few of their shows the other night on Newsmax, right? Where people are, and we don't do a ton of advertising. I mean, it's word of mouth. People are coming and saying, hey, I like the network, I like your show. And that's because there's alternatives, and they're losing their grip. So that's they don't want you to see anything but what they show you. But I'm a big believer in whether it's Newsmax, The Blaze, Heritage. I mean, all of these, we need to support the big team and get out there, share stuff, encourage other people to get involved. But it is part of our duty as Americans to be in this arena.
An America worth fighting for, to push back against this potential radical nation. I've got one last question for you.
Yeah.
The picture, the masks.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, if there was an image to describe the last year and a half, talk to me about deciding this picture, why you chose it, what it means for the cover.
So we went back and forth on a lot of different designs, and it's like anything else. When you find the right one, and this is as you mentioned, my third book. The first two just had me on it. But even then, you go through and you're like, what's that image you want to convey? And when we saw that, it was like, that's it.
That's it.
And it spoke to us because that is everything that's there. It's the hypocrisy. It's the double standards. It's the freedom. I mean, everything, you try to say.
She's right there.
Right. Looking over his shoulder, looking out, kind of like,
how are you feeling today,
How
sir?
are you feeling today? By the way, I love the fact yesterday, we covered this last night. She walked into her own birthday party and yelled, surprise. She can't even do a birthday right. You wonder why the rest of the stuff is screwed up. If you can't do a birthday surprise right, you know that you're in trouble.
Wow. Sean, thank you for this.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody being
Thank
here.
you to Sean Spicer.
Thank you to Heritage Action.
Fabulous book. Radical Nation, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's Dangerous Plan for America. We have free copies for everyone today that Sean was gracious enough to sign for us just outside, and we've got some refreshments to enjoy, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today and for Sean for leading the fight.
Thank you guys.
Protect America.
Thank you all for being here.
Sean
Appreciate
Spicer.
it. Thank you.